The morning sun painted the Texas panhandle in shades of amber and rust, but Cole Maverick saw only the color of blood. It stained everything these days: the drought-cracked earth, the withered mesquite, even the memories that haunted his waking hours. 5 years since Elena and Michael had been laid to rest beneath the twisted oak behind Thunder Creek Ranch, and still the pain cut fresh as a cavalry saber. He knelt beside the creek that gave his land its name, watching the thin trickle of water that was all the drought had left. Once this stream had run clear and strong, fed by underground springs that seemed inexhaustible. Now it barely sustained his remaining cattle, and even those grew fewer each season. The Apache called him Ma'i Bizad Silent Wolf. They said it with respect, these few who remembered the old ways and still whispered of the white man who had learned to read the land's secrets. Cole had earned that name through 5 years of solitude, 5 years of speaking mainly to his horse and the ghosts that visited his dreams. A movement in the distance caught his eye. Dust cloud, maybe 2 miles east, moving fast and erratic. In country, this empty anything moving that quickly meant trouble. Cole rose smoothly, his hand finding the worn grip of the Colt Army revolver that had served him through Gettysburg and a dozen smaller hells since. He whistled low, bringing his horse trotting from the shade of the barn. Thunder was a big blue roan with intelligent eyes and the patience to stand statue still while his master lined up impossible shots. They'd been partners for 7 years now, through war and peace, grief, and the slow healing that came with honest work under an endless sky. "Come on, boy," Cole murmured, swinging into the saddle with the fluid grace of a man born to horseback. "Someone's having a worse day than us." The dust cloud resolved itself as he drew closer. A single rider on a bay mare, both horse and human, moving with the desperate urgency of the pursued. The rider swayed in the saddle, barely maintaining balance, while the mare's gait grew increasingly unsteady. Cole urged Thunder into a ground-eating lope, covering the distance with practiced efficiency. As he closed in, details became clear. The rider was a woman, her dark hair whipping free from beneath a battered hat. Her clothes spoke of quality beneath the trail, dust-divided riding skirt of fine wool boots that had cost more than most cowboys saw in a month. The mare stumbled, sending her rider tumbling to the hard-packed earth. The animal tried to rise, then collapsed again with a heartbreaking whinny of pain. "Broken leg," Cole diagnosed with a glance. The beast was finished. He dismounted quickly, approaching the fallen woman with the caution 5 years of frontier living had burned into his bones. She lay motionless, face down in the dust, blood matting the dark hair at her temple. Kneeling beside her, Cole checked for a pulse. It fluttered weak but steady beneath his calloused fingertips. Alive then, though unconscious and injured. Her skin was pale beneath the dust and sun, suggesting city life rather than frontier hardship. "Ma'am," he called softly, "can you hear me?" No response. Cole looked around, checking for signs of pursuit or other threats. The landscape stretched empty in all directions, but something had driven this woman to ride her horse to death in the middle of nowhere. That something might still be coming. With gentle hands, he lifted her into his arms. She was lighter than he'd expected, though he detected a subtle fullness around her middle that spoke of early pregnancy. The realization sent a chill through him, a pregnant woman alone and fleeing through hostile country. The mare was suffering, foam flecking her muzzle as she struggled uselessly to rise. Cole drew his revolver, whispering an apology to the noble animal before putting a single bullet through her brain. The sound echoed across the empty land like a funeral bell. He secured the woman across Thunder's saddle, then mounted behind her, one arm wrapped protectively around her waist. As they rode toward home, he found himself studying her face and profile. She was beautiful in the refined way of Eastern cities, with high cheekbones and a determined chin that suggested strength beneath the vulnerability. "Not much for conversation anyway," he told the unconscious woman, as Thunder picked his way carefully across the rough terrain. "Reckon we'll get along fine." The ranch house at Thunder Creek had been built by Cole's grandfather, expanded by his father, and maintained with the meticulous care of a man who had nowhere else to go. 2 stories of native stone and weathered timber. It commanded a view of the surrounding countryside while offering protection from the harsh elements that defined life in the Panhandle. Cole carried his unexpected guest to the spare room, Elena's sewing room, which he'd avoided for 5 years, and laid her gently on the narrow bed. The irony wasn't lost on him. The first woman to enter this house since his wife's death was unconscious and possibly dying. By lamplight, he examined her injuries more carefully. The head wound looked worse than it was, as such injuries often did. A clean cut from a sharp stone bleeding freely but not life-threatening. He cleaned it with the gentle precision of a man who'd tended enough battlefield wounds to know his business. Her saddlebags yielded few clues. Some provisions, a small pearl-handled derringer, and several folded documents. Cole hesitated, conscience warring with necessity. He needed to know who he'd brought into his home, but going through a woman's personal effects felt like violation. In the end, caution won. The first document he unfolded was a letter of transit written in flowing Spanish. La portadora de esta carta, señora Isabela Chen Martínez, viaja bajo la protección de la República Mexicana. Cualquier cortesía extendida a ella será reconocida como una deuda personal de honor. General Francisco Valdez, Comandante, Distrito Norte. Cole's eyebrows rose. A Mexican letter of transit was unusual enough, but the name gave him pause. Chen suggested Chinese heritage. Martinez was clearly Spanish, and her features showed mixed ancestry that spoke of the complex bloodlines common along the border. The second document was more disturbing, a death certificate bearing an official seal from El Paso County, James Chen Martinez, attorney at law. Cause of death, accidental drowning. Date, March 15, 1885. Fresh grief then. Cole refolded the papers carefully, returning them to the saddlebag with a growing sense that he'd stepped into something far more complicated than a simple rescue. A soft moan from the bed drew his attention. The woman Isabella, according to the documents, was stirring. Her eyelids fluttered, then opened, revealing eyes the deep brown of rich coffee. For a moment they were unfocused, then sharpened with sudden alertness that surprised him. This was no helpless city woman. Whatever had driven her to ride alone through hostile country, she was accustomed to danger. She tried to sit up, gasping as pain lanced through her head. Easy now, Cole said, keeping his distance. His voice came out rougher than intended from days of disuse. You're safe. Isabella's gaze swept the room, cataloging exits and potential weapons with the practiced assessment of someone who'd learned that survival depended on constant vigilance. When her eyes found the Colt on his hip, they lingered for a moment before returning to his face. Where am I? Her voice carried the cultured tones of education, but beneath it lay something harder. Steel wrapped in silk. Thunder Creek Ranch, Texas. Cole set his hat on the dresser, trying to appear less threatening. Found you unconscious after your horse went down. The animal didn't make it. Her hand went instinctively to her belly, and Cole saw a relief flicker across her features when she found herself unharmed. The protective gesture confirmed his suspicion about her condition. You've been tending to me. It wasn't a question, but there was surprise in her voice. Did what needed doing? Nothing improper. Cole shifted uncomfortably under her steady gaze. You've been out about 2 hours. Storm's building to the east. You are welcome to shelter here till it passes. Isabella studied him with the intensity of someone accustomed to reading men's intentions in their faces. Whatever she saw must have reassured her because she relaxed slightly against the pillows. You have a name, sir, Cole Maverick, and you are Isabella. She paused as if deciding how much truth to reveal. Isabella Martinez. The omission of her full name wasn't lost on Cole, but he let it pass. Everyone in this country had secrets worth keeping. Mexican papers in your saddlebag suggest you are a long way from home, Mrs. Martinez. Her eyes widened slightly. You went through my things. Needed to know who I was bringing into my house. Didn't read more than necessary. Cole's tone carried quiet dignity. Your business is your own, but armed men don't usually chase pregnant women through empty country for innocent reasons. Isabella's poker face cracked slightly. How did you know you were being chased? Your horse was pushed beyond endurance. You kept looking over your shoulder even while unconscious, and you're carrying a gun despite traveling alone. Omar Cole's pale blue held her steadily. As for the other, any man with eyes could tell. She looked away, one hand moving protectively to her stomach again. How far along would you say? Not my place to speculate on such matters, ma'am. Despite everything, Isabella smiled. A gentleman cowboy. James always said Texas bred them different. The mention of her dead husband cast a shadow over her features. Cole saw grief there, fresh and raw, but also something harder. Anger, perhaps, or determination for justice. Was James your husband? Yes. Her voice carried a weight of loss that Cole recognized intimately. He died 3 months ago. They said it was an accident. But you don't believe that. I know it wasn't. Her brown eyes flashed with controlled fury. James was investigating land acquisitions along the Rio Grande. Illegal seizures backed by forged documents and intimidation. He was getting close to exposing the truth when he accidentally drowned in 2 feet of water. Cole felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. Land fraud was common enough in frontier territory, but the systematic elimination of investigators suggested something far more dangerous than simple greed. Any idea who might be behind it? A man named Cornelius Blackwood. He owns half of El Paso and wants to own the other half, along with everything between here and the Mexican border. Isabella's hands clenched unconsciously. James had proof documents, witness statements, evidence of bribery and murder. All of it disappeared the day he died. All of it. Isabella's smile was grim. James was careful. He made copies, hid them in places only I would know to look. I've been gathering evidence for 3 months following leads he'd identified before his death. Leading you here. Leading me to Thunder Creek Ranch, specifically. Isabella's gaze sharpened. James believed this land sits on something Blackwood wants badly enough to kill for. Something more valuable than cattle or farmland. Before Cole could respond, the sound of approaching horses drifted through the evening air. Multiple riders moving fast and with purpose. Cole moved to the window, peering through the gap in the curtains. 6 men sat their horses in a loose semicircle around the house, professional spacing designed to cut off escape routes. Even in the fading light, Cole could see the quality of their weapons and the casual way they held them. These weren't cowboys or drifters, they were soldiers, or men who'd learned soldiering the hard way. Seems your troubles have followed you, Cole said quietly, checking his Colt's action out of long habit. Isabella had moved to join him at the window despite her injuries. Blackwood's men, they've been tracking me for weeks. A voice called from the yard, cultured and confident, despite the implied threat, Mrs. Martinez. This is Captain Morrison acting on behalf of Mr. Blackwood. We know you're in there. Come out and we can discuss your late husband's affairs like civilized people. Civilized? Isabella whispered bitterly. They murdered James in cold blood. Mrs. Martinez, Morrison called again. Mr. Blackwood bears you no ill will. He simply wants to ensure that certain documents find their way to the proper authorities. Legal authorities, of course. Cole was already moving, gathering weapons and ammunition with the efficient haste of a veteran. How many rounds you got for that Derringer? 2. Make them count. He handed her a Winchester rifle from the gun cabinet. You know how to use this, James taught me. Isabella checked the weapon's action with surprising competence. But there are 6 of them, and we're trapped in here. Not trapped, cornered. There's a difference. Cole moved to the back window, scanning the approaches. See the old chicken coop maybe 70 yards north? My grandfather dug a tunnel during the Indian Wars. Leads from the root cellar to that coop. A way out. If they don't have it covered, Cole's expression was grim. Professional spacing suggests they know their business. But it's the only chance we've got. Before Isabella could respond, Morrison's voice cut through the evening air again. Mr. Maverick, I know you're in there too. This doesn't concern you. Send out the woman and you can go back to your cattle in solitude. How does he know your name? Isabella whispered. Because Blackwood makes it his business to know everything about anyone who might interfere with his plans. Cole's jaw tightened. Your husband wasn't the first person to die for opposing him. Mr. Maverick, Morrison continued, Mrs. Martinez has stolen property belonging to Mr. Blackwood. We're simply here to retrieve it. Cooperate, and everyone walks away from this. Cole raised his voice to carry outside. Captain Morrison, you're trespassing on my land, threatening my guest. I suggest you and your men ride on before this gets unpleasant. Laughter echoed from the yard, harsh and utterly without humor. Mr. Maverick, you have no idea what you're interfering with. Mrs. Martinez possesses documents that could damage innocent people's reputations. We're here to prevent that tragedy. Innocent people like the ones your boss had murdered. The temperature in Morrison's voice dropped noticeably. I see the lady has been filling your head with fantasies. Grief affects the mind, Mr. Maverick. My employer's only concern is justice. Funny thing about justice, Cole called back, usually doesn't require 6 armed men to deliver it. Morrison's response came in the form of concentrated rifle fire. Bullets shattered the front windows, chewed splinters from the shutters, and sent both Cole and Isabella diving for cover behind the overturned dining table. Negotiations over, Cole observed dryly, working the lever action of his Winchester with practiced efficiency. What now? Isabella asked, checking her own weapon. Now we even the odds. Cole's first shot punched through the evening air with the authority of a man who'd learned precision under fire. One of Morrison's men tumbled from his saddle, clutching his shoulder, not a killing shot, but enough to send a message that the occupants of the house weren't helpless prey. 5 left, Cole muttered, already working the Winchester's lever action. Isabella had positioned herself at the side window, the rifle steady in her hands despite her condition. They're pulling back behind the barn, regrouping. Smart move, gives them cover and cuts off our escape route. Cole scanned the yard, noting how Morrison's remaining men had spread out to cover all approaches. Professional deployment. These aren't hired drifters. Cornelius doesn't employ amateurs. Isabella's voice carried bitter knowledge. He learned early that reputation matters more than conscience in his line of work. A new voice called from behind the barn, younger than Morrison's, with a rough frontier accent that spoke of years in the saddle. Maverick name's Jake Cordell. Maybe you heard of me. Cole had indeed heard of Sidewinder Jake Cordell, a gun for hire with a reputation for taking difficult contracts and seeing them through to permanent conclusions. The fact that Blackwood could afford Cordell's services suggested resources far beyond simple land speculation. Heard you were in Yuma prison, Cole called back. Got out early for good behavior, came Cordell's harsh laugh. Here's the situation, Maverick. You got something that don't belong to you, namely Mrs. Martinez there and whatever papers she's carrying. We aim to collect both peaceful-like if possible. And if not possible, then we collect them anyway and you get to meet your maker sooner than expected. Isabella moved closer to Cole, keeping low beneath the window frame. There's something you should know, she said quietly, about why I really came to Thunder Creek Ranch. Story time again. James discovered something about this land, something that makes it worth killing for. Her dark eyes held his steadily. It's not just about the ranch, Cole. It's about what lies beneath it. Before Cole could respond, movement caught his eye. 2 of Morrison's men were circling wide, using the gathering darkness to approach the house's blindside. Classic flanking maneuver designed to split the defender's attention. Company coming, he warned, swinging the Winchester toward the new threat. Isabella raised her rifle, though at this range her shots would need to count. Cole, listen to me. James found evidence that this entire region sits on top of an underground river system. Ancient Apache waterways that most people don't even know exist. The old springs, Cole said, understanding beginning to dawn. My grandfather always said this land was blessed. The creek never runs completely dry, even in the worst drought. According to James's research, Thunder Creek Ranch sits on what the Apache call the heart of waters, the main source that feeds springs and wells for hundreds of miles in every direction. The implications hit Cole like a physical blow. In a drought-ravaged territory where water meant the difference between life and death, control of the primary source would be worth a fortune. Worth killing for, certainly. Control the heart of waters, he began. Control all the water rights in West Texas, Isabella finished grimly. In conditions like these, that's power beyond measure. Power to determine who prospers and who dies. The flanking gunmen had reached the house's north wall. Cole could hear their boots on the porch boards moving with practiced stealth toward the back door. He made a swift calculation. The Winchester held 15 rounds. He had maybe 40 cartridges total and 5 professional killers to account for. Mathematics that didn't favor the defenders. Isabella, he said, using her given name for the first time. That tunnel I mentioned. I want you to... No. Her interruption was firm. I won't hide while you face this alone. You're carrying a child. I'm carrying a child not made of glass. Her eyes flashed with determination that reminded Cole painfully of Elena in her stubborn moments. Besides, you said yourself they might have the escape route covered. She was right, but every instinct rebelled against keeping a pregnant woman in the line of fire. Before he could argue further, the back door exploded inward under the impact of a rifle butt. Jake Cordell stepped through the opening, Colt revolver tracking smoothly across the room. Cole's Winchester spoke first, the bullet catching Cordell high in the chest and spinning him backward into his partner. Both men went down in a tangle of limbs, Cordell's shot going wide and punching a hole in the far wall. "Three down," Cole said grimly, working the lever action. "Three to go." But Morrison wasn't finished. Even as Cole spoke, smoke began seeping through the floorboards. The bastard was trying to burn them out. "Fire," Isabella said unnecessarily, her voice tight with controlled fear. Cole moved to the front window, scanning the yard for Morrison's position. There behind the water trough, directing his remaining men with the calm efficiency of a field commander. The man might be a killer and a thief, but he understood tactics. "Isabella, grab whatever you can carry. We're leaving." The tunnel. "No choice now. Fire or bullets? I'd rather face the bullets." They gathered what supplies they could in the growing smoke. Cole's spare ammunition, Isabella's saddlebags with the documents, canteens of water that might mean the difference between life and death in the days ahead. The smoke was thickening, making breathing difficult and stinging their eyes. Cole led the way to the root cellar, a narrow opening hidden beneath the kitchen table. The tunnel beyond was little more than a crawl space carved by his grandfather during the Apache troubles of the 1860s. It would be a tight fit for a man of Cole's size, nearly impossible for a pregnant woman, if panic took hold. "Stay close," he whispered, dropping into the darkness. "Keep one hand on my boot. If shooting starts above us, don't stop moving, no matter what you hear." The tunnel seemed to stretch forever, though Cole knew it was barely 100 yards to the old chicken coop. The earth pressed close around them, heavy with the scent of decades-old fear and desperate hope. Behind them, the house burned with increasing intensity, smoke seeping through cracks in the tunnel ceiling. They emerged into gray twilight, the chicken coop providing minimal concealment, but at least offering room to breathe. Cole checked his rifle, counting rounds automatically. 11 left in the magazine, 2 spare boxes in his coat pocket. Maybe enough if his aim stayed true. "Now what?" Isabella whispered, dust and cobwebs clinging to her dark hair. "Now we disappear." Cole pointed toward the distant canyon that marked the northern boundary of his property. "There's someone up there who might help, if we can reach him." "Who?" "An old Apache medicine man, White Feather. Folks in town call him Ghost Walker when they bother to call him anything at all." Isabella's eyes widened. "The Apache who knows about the water sources?" "The same. If anyone can help us understand what Blackwood's really after, it's him." They slipped from the chicken coop into the concealment of the mesquite scrub that dotted the landscape. The canyon lay 2 miles away across open ground that offered little cover. But Morrison's men would be focused on the burning house for now, giving them a narrow window of opportunity. They moved carefully, using every fold in the terrain to mask their passage. Cole had learned this kind of movement during the war, slipping through Confederate picket lines on intelligence missions that required ghost-like stealth. Isabella proved surprisingly adept for someone accustomed to city life, keeping low and quiet despite her condition. Halfway to the canyon, disaster struck. One of Morrison's men, the one Cole had wounded earlier, spotted them from a ridge to the east. His shout of alarm echoed across the landscape, followed immediately by rifle fire. "Run!" Cole ordered, abandoning stealth for speed. They sprinted across the open ground, bullets kicking up dust around their feet. The canyon mouth loomed ahead, promising sanctuary among the towering stone walls. But distance and rough terrain worked against them, especially with Isabella's pregnancy limiting her mobility. A shot came closer than the others, close enough that Cole felt the bullet's passage. He turned, bringing the Winchester to his shoulder, and sent a round back toward their pursuers. Not aimed to kill, but to discourage immediate pursuit and buy them precious seconds. They reached the canyon just as Morrison and his remaining men crested the ridge behind them. 3 men still armed and mounted, with the advantage of higher ground. Cole cursed under his breath as he helped Isabella into the narrow defile that led deeper into the canyon. "Keep moving," he urged. "White Feather's place is maybe a mile up this canyon. If we can reach him—" "If he'll help," Isabella interrupted breathlessly. "He'll help." Cole hoped his confidence was justified. White Feather had always been enigmatic in his dealings with white settlers, friendly enough but maintaining careful distance. Whether that friendliness extended to harboring fugitives remained to be seen. The canyon narrowed as they climbed walls, rising sheer on either side until only a strip of star-dotted sky remained visible overhead. An ancient creek bed provided their path, bone dry after 3 years of drought, but still marked by the smooth stones water had tumbled for centuries. Behind them, the sound of pursuit echoed off the canyon walls. Morrison's men had dismounted, following on foot through terrain too treacherous for horses. The tactical advantage had shifted in these narrow confines. Numbers mattered less than knowledge of the ground. There, Cole pointed ahead to where the canyon opened into a hidden valley, White Feather's sanctuary. The valley was a revelation in the drought-stricken landscape. Ancient cottonwoods shaded a clear pool fed by a spring that bubbled up from deep underground. It was like stepping into a different world, one where the drought held no power, and life flourished in defiance of the harsh conditions that defined the surrounding territory. At the valley's heart stood a dwelling that seemed to grow from the landscape itself, part adobe, part natural cave, part structures too old for easy categorization. Smoke rose from a central fire pit, and the scent of burning sage drifted on the evening air like incense in a natural cathedral. White Feather emerged from the dwelling as they approached. He was tall, despite his advanced years, with silver hair braided in the traditional style and eyes that held the accumulated wisdom of decades spent reading the land's secrets. His buckskins were well-worn but immaculate, and a bone-handled knife rode at his hip with the casual ease of a weapon frequently used. "Cole Maverick," the old Apache said without preamble, his English flavored with the formal cadences of a man educated in mission schools but never fully tamed by them. "You bring trouble to the Sacred Valley." "Didn't have much choice, White Feather. This is Isabella Chen Martinez, daughter of two peoples, wife of the dead truth seeker, carrier of new life, keeper of dangerous knowledge." White Feather's gaze shifted to Isabella with unsettling intensity, as if he could read her entire history in her face. "I know who she is. The question is whether you understand what you've brought into my sanctuary." Before either could respond, gunfire echoed from the canyon mouth. Morrison's men had reached the valley entrance, though they hadn't yet located the hidden settlement among the concealing cottonwoods. "Hired killers," Cole said grimly, "working for a man named Cornelius Blackwood." Blackwood. White Feather spoke the name like a curse, his weathered features hardening with an emotion Cole had never seen in the normally serene medicine man. "The water thief, the poisoner of sacred springs." "Yes, I know of him." "Then you'll help us." White Feather studied them both for a long moment, his ancient eyes seeming to see beyond the immediate crisis to possibilities and consequences that remained hidden from younger vision. "The spirit's whisper of change coming," he said finally. "Old ways ending, new ways beginning. The time of choosing sides in the white man's war has arrived, whether we welcome it or not." He gestured toward his dwelling. "Come, we will speak of water and blood, of vengeance and justice. And we will decide whether the heart of waters flows free or dies in chains." As they followed White Feather into the cool shadows of his sanctuary, Cole couldn't help but feel they'd crossed more than just a physical threshold. They'd entered a different kind of conflict now, one where the rules of civilized warfare no longer applied and the stakes reached far beyond personal survival. Behind them, Morrison's men continued their search, unaware they had stumbled into a place where older, darker powers still held sway. Powers that had been waiting patiently for the right moment to remind the modern world that some things couldn't be bought, sold, or stolen. Some things could only be earned through blood, courage, and respect for the sacred bonds between humanity and the living earth. The war for the water was about to begin in earnest. Inside White Feather's dwelling, the outside world seemed distant despite the continued sounds of search and pursuit. The Apache medicine man moved with purposeful efficiency, gathering items from around his sanctuary, while Cole and Isabella caught their breath. "Your enemies grow impatient," White Feather observed, noting the increasing frequency of gunshots from the canyon. "Morrison's men are not accustomed to prey that knows how to run and hide." "They're not accustomed to losing either," Isabella said, accepting a gourd of water from their host. "Cornelius doesn't tolerate failure in his employees." White Feather's weathered features creased in what might have been amusement. "Then they will learn new lessons today. This canyon has many secrets, and not all of them are unkind to uninvited guests." Cole checked his rifle again, a nervous habit from his military days. "How many ways out of this valley?" "For those who know the old paths, many. For those who do not." White Feather shrugged eloquently. "The canyon is patient. It will hold Morrison's men as long as necessary." "We can't hide here forever," Isabella pointed out. "Eventually, Cornelius will bring more men or simply wait us out." "True words," White Feather agreed. "Which is why we must act, not merely react. The water thief believes himself hunter, But every hunter can become prey if the circumstances change. He moved to the back of his dwelling, returning with an array of items that made Cole reassess his understanding of the old Apache. There were weapons, a cavalry saber with U.S. markings, a pair of Colt Navy revolvers that had seen recent maintenance, a bow made from some dark wood Cole didn't recognize. But there were also other things, small clay vessels, bundles of herbs, and what appeared to be a detailed map drawn on carefully prepared hide. "You were a soldier," Cole said, not entirely a question. "I am a warrior," Whitefeather corrected with quiet pride. "Age changes tactics, not purpose. For 40 years I have watched white men carve up the land like butchers with a fresh carcass. Most I ignored, their damage was small, temporary. But Blackwood," his eyes hardened with an emotion that transformed his serene features into something far more dangerous. "Blackwood seeks to wound the earth's heart. That cannot be allowed." Isabella leaned forward, studying the hide map with fascination. "This shows the underground waterways, the entire network." "The sacred flow," Whitefeather confirmed with reverent pride. "What your people call the Apache Waterway. It connects springs and wells across hundreds of miles, all fed by the heart of waters that lies beneath Cole's ranch." "My ranch," Cole corrected automatically, then paused as the full implication hit him like a physical blow. "The spring that feeds Thunder Creek. Your grandfather was guided to the listening place." Whitefeather explained, his voice taking on the formal cadences of ancient storytelling. "I showed him where to dig, as my grandfather showed his father before him. The heart of waters has provided for the people of this land for 1,000 years. It will not become Blackwood's property." The sound of voices from outside interrupted them. Morrison's men had found the valley entrance, though they seemed uncertain about entering the sacred space uninvited. "Boss wants us to flush them out," came a gruff voice Cole didn't recognize. "Then you go flush," replied another, clearly nervous. "Me, I don't like the feel of this place. Too quiet, too green. Ain't natural in country this dry." Whitefeather smiled coldly. "Wisdom sometimes comes even to hired killers." "They won't stay scared forever," Cole warned. "Morrison will push them forward eventually. Then we must provide them with greater fears to consider." Whitefeather gathered several small clay vessels, handling them with ceremonial care. "The heart of waters is not defenseless. She has guardians older than your grandfather's grandfather's, spirits that sleep lightly and wake angry when the sacred waters are threatened." Isabella glanced skeptically between the two men. "Are we talking about supernatural intervention or practical military tactics?" "Does it matter?" Whitefeather asked mildly, his eyes twinkling with ancient mischief. "Fear is fear, whether it comes from bullets or spirits. Confused enemies make mistakes. Frightened enemies flee." A plan was taking shape in Cole's mind, built from half-remembered lessons in unconventional warfare and a growing understanding of the power dynamics at play. Morrison had numbers and professional soldiers, but he was operating on unfamiliar ground against opponents who knew every rock and shadow. "What do you need from us?" he asked Whitefeather. "The woman must be protected." The old Apache's gaze shifted to Isabella with paternal concern. "She carries more than new life, she carries the truth about Blackwood's crimes. That makes her valuable to more than just her enemies." "Meaning?" Isabella asked, though something in her expression suggested she already suspected the answer. "Meaning," came a new voice from the dwelling's entrance, "that federal marshals have been looking for exactly the kind of evidence Mrs. Martinez possesses." All three spun toward the voice. A tall, lean man stood silhouetted against the evening light, his hands carefully visible and empty. Native features combined with European bone structure suggested mixed heritage, while his clothes spoke of long miles in the saddle and the careful maintenance of someone who lived by his weapons. "Joaquin Ramirez," the stranger introduced himself with a slight bow that managed to be both respectful and mocking. "Some folks call me the Hawk. I've been tracking Blackwood's operation for the better part of 8 months." Cole's Winchester came up smoothly, though he didn't quite aim it at the newcomer. "Funny way of announcing yourself, Ramirez. Most polite folks knock. Most polite folks aren't trying to avoid getting shot by nervous fugitives." Joaquin's mouth quirked in what might have been a smile. "Whitefeather and I have an understanding. He lets me use the old trails when I'm hunting really dangerous game." "What kind of game?" Isabella asked, though her rifle remained ready. The kind that wears expensive suits and bribes federal judges, Joaquin replied, his voice carrying the bitter edge of personal experience. The kind that's been systematically murdering anyone who gets too close to the truth about Western Development Corporation's water acquisition program. Whitefeather gestured for Joaquin to enter fully. He speaks truth. This one has Apache blood through his grandmother's line. The spirits trust him, and so do I. The spirits maybe, Cole said dryly. I'm still making up my mind. Joaquin moved with the fluid grace of someone equally at home in wilderness or civilization. His gear was travel-worn, but well-maintained, and Cole noted the professional way his eyes swept the interior, cataloging details and potential threats. Mrs. Martinez, Joaquin said formally, removing his hat. I'm sorry for your loss. Your husband was a good man doing important work. His death wasn't in vain if we can use his research to bring Blackwood to justice. You knew James, Isabella's voice carried a mixture of hope and suspicion that Cole was beginning to recognize as her default response to strangers. We corresponded. He'd uncovered evidence of a conspiracy reaching from Chicago to Mexico City, centered around controlling water rights throughout the Southwest Territory. When he stopped writing, I knew Blackwood had acted. And you've been tracking Blackwood ever since. Among others, Blackwood's operation involves corrupt federal officials, bribed state legislators, and murdered property owners across 3 territories. It's bigger than just one company's ambitions. It's a systematic attempt to control the most valuable resource in the American West. The sound of approaching boots interrupted their conversation. Morrison's men had overcome their reluctance to enter the sacred valley, though they moved with obvious caution through the concealing cottonwoods. 3 men, Whitefeather said quietly, somehow divining their number despite the acoustic confusion of the forest. They spread wide, trying to surround the dwelling. Professional spacing, Joaquin confirmed, checking his own weapons. These aren't cowboys playing at being soldiers. Cole positioned himself at one of the narrow windows, Winchester ready. So what's the plan? Wait for them to find us, or take the fight to them? Neither, Whitefeather said, rising with a bundle of clay vessels in his hands. We teach them why the Apache have held this land for 1,000 years. He moved toward a concealed opening at the back of the dwelling, gesturing for the others to follow. The sacred pool has many guardians. Time to wake them. Joaquin fell in beside Cole as they moved deeper into the cave system behind Whitefeather's sanctuary. You're Cole Maverick, he said. It wasn't a question. Heard about you during the war. They called you the Silent Wolf. That was a long time ago. Not so long that you've forgotten how to fight. Joaquin's smile was sharp-edged with the kind of understanding that only came from shared experience under fire. Apache warfare doesn't follow white man's rules. Neither do the enemies we're facing. They emerged into a natural amphitheater carved from the canyon's living rock, centered around a pool of water so clear it seemed almost crystalline. Ancient pictographs decorated the walls depicting warriors, spirits, and ceremonies that predated European arrival by centuries. The very air seemed to hum with power, as if the space itself were alive and aware. The heart of waters, Whitefeather announced with reverent pride. Source of life for all the connected springs, sacred to the people since the world was young. Isabella stared at the clear water in wonder, her journalist's eye noting details even as her soul responded to the spiritual power of the place. It's beautiful. How deep is it? Deep enough to hide secrets, Whitefeather replied cryptically. Old enough to remember when the first people came to drink from its blessing. The sound of boots on stone echoed from the tunnel behind them. Morrison's men had found the concealed entrance, though they moved cautiously through the unfamiliar passages, their voices echoing strangely in the acoustic maze of the cave system. Time to demonstrate why some places remain sacred, Whitefeather said, uncorking one of his clay vessels. Whatever he poured into the pool began to glow with an eerie blue-green phosphorescence, turning the clear water into something otherworldly. The light reflected off the canyon walls, creating dancing shadows that seemed almost alive, and the pictographs appeared to writhe and shift in the shifting illumination. Phosphorescent algae, Joaquin explained quietly to Cole and Isabella. Harmless but dramatic. Whitefeather has been cultivating it for years. And the rest, Cole asked, noting how Whitefeather was positioning additional vessels around the pool's perimeter with ceremonial precision. Traditional Apache psychological warfare. Joaquin grinned, his teeth white in the supernatural light. Your enemies expect bullets and blade work. They were not prepared for spirits and ancient curses. The first of Morrison's men emerged into the amphitheater, rifle raised, but obviously shaken by the supernatural atmosphere White Feather had created. The glowing pool cast his face in alien shadows, while the pictographs seemed to writhe in the shifting light like living things trapped in stone. Jesus Christ, the gunman whispered, clearly unnerved by what he was seeing. Wrong mythology, White Feather said from the shadows, his voice echoing strangely off the stone walls in a way that made it impossible to determine his exact location. You trespass on sacred ground, water thief. The spirits of the pool are not pleased with your presence. More phosphorescence bloomed in the water, triggered by devices White Feather had prepared in advance. To men who'd never encountered such phenomena, the effect must have seemed genuinely supernatural, as if the water itself were responding to the medicine man's words. It's just tricks, the second gunman said, though his voice lacked conviction and his rifle barrel wavered nervously. Chemical reactions or some such nonsense. And then drink from the sacred pool. White Feather challenged, stepping into view with his ancient weapons gleaming in the eerie light. Taste the water you seek to steal for your master and learn whether spirits are mere tricks of chemistry. Neither gunman moved toward the pool. Whatever bravado they'd possessed outside the canyon was evaporating in the face of forces they couldn't understand or control, phenomena that challenged everything they thought they knew about the natural world. Where's Morrison? Joaquin called out, his own weapon now visible but not quite threatening. Too cowardly to face his crimes in person. Captain Morrison's waiting at the canyon mouth. One of the gunmen replied, his voice tight with barely controlled fear. Said to bring you out alive, if possible, dead if necessary. How accommodating, Cole observed dryly. Tell Morrison if he wants us, he can come get us himself. He ain't coming down here, the second gunman said with absolute conviction. This place ain't natural. Ain't right. White Feather smiled coldly, the expression transforming his serene features into something far more dangerous. Wisdom comes late, but it comes. You may leave the sacred valley unharmed, water thieves. But know this, anyone who returns with evil intent will face more than glowing pools and ancient spirits. The psychological warfare was working perfectly. Morrison's professional killers were reduced to nervous, superstitious men, afraid of shadows and strange lights. But Cole knew the effect wouldn't last forever. Eventually, Morrison would overcome his men's reluctance through threats or bribes, and they'd return in greater numbers with better preparation. We need a permanent solution, he said quietly to Joaquin. Running and hiding won't stop Blackwood's operation. Agreed, but first we need to get Mrs. Martinez somewhere safe. Her testimony is crucial for the federal case we're building. And the water source, White Feather had been listening to their quiet conference. The heart of waters protects itself, he said with absolute certainty, but only if those who would defend it show courage equal to their enemy's greed. As if summoned by his words, Morrison's voice echoed down the canyon, amplified by the stone walls until it seemed to come from everywhere at once. Mrs. Martinez, this has gone far enough. Come out now and we can settle this matter like civilized people. Continue this resistance and I'll be forced to take more drastic measures. Such as, Isabella called back, her voice steady despite the obvious strain of their situation. Such as burning out every ranch and farm within 50 miles until someone tells me where you're hiding. Such as ensuring that your unborn child never draws breath. Such as demonstrating that Mr. Blackwood always collects what belongs to him. The naked threat hung in the air like a physical presence, filling the sacred space with an ugliness that seemed to pollute the very atmosphere. Morrison had abandoned any pretense of legal authority or civilized behavior. This was raw power speaking backed by money and violence, and the absolute conviction that might made right. Now he shows his true face, White Feather said grimly. The mask of civilization discarded for the reality of the beast beneath. Cole checked his weapons one final time. The Winchester held 11 rounds, his Colt revolver 6 more. Joaquin appeared equally well armed, while White Feather's traditional weapons looked well maintained and frequently used. Against Morrison's remaining men, it might be enough. Might be. What's the plan? He asked. We end this, Joaquin said simply, his voice carrying the cold finality of a man who'd made peace with violence. Morrison's made too many threats, killed too many people. Time to balance the scales. And if we don't make it, White Feather touched one of his clay vessels with something approaching reverence. Then the heart of waters will remember, and the spirits will ensure that Blackwood's victory is temporary at best. But before they could prepare for Morrison's final assault, Isabella's voice cut through their planning with an urgency that demanded immediate attention. "Cole," she said, her face pale in the supernatural light, "there's something else you need to know. Something I should have told you from the beginning." The way she said it sent a chill through him that had nothing to do with the cool air of the cave. "What is it?" "The night James died, he gave me more than just documents and evidence." Her hand moved protectively to her belly. "He gave me this." She reached into her blouse, withdrawing a small leather pouch that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. As she opened it, Cole saw what appeared to be ordinary water, but the liquid moved strangely as if it were alive. "Water from the heart of waters." White Feather whispered, his eyes widening with something approaching religious awe. "Impossible. The sacred pool has never given up its essence willingly." "James found a way," Isabella said quietly. "He discovered that the water has properties, healing properties, properties that could cure diseases, extend life, maybe even reverse aging. That's what Blackwood really wants. Not just control of the water supply, but control of the fountain of youth itself." The revelation hit Cole like a physical blow. If Isabella was right, then they weren't just fighting for water rights or land ownership. They were fighting for control of the most valuable substance on Earth, a resource that could reshape the balance of power across the entire continent. "My God," he breathed. No wonder Blackwood was willing to kill for it. And no wonder became Morrison's voice from the tunnel entrance that he's willing to kill again. The captain stepped into the amphitheater with his remaining men flanking him, weapons trained on the defenders. But there was something different about Morrison now, something hungry and desperate that suggested he understood exactly what was at stake. "Mrs. Martinez," he said, his cultured voice echoing strangely in the sacred space, "you've led us quite a chase, but it's time to end this game and discuss the real business at hand." As the final confrontation began, Cole found himself thinking not just of survival, but of legacy. If they failed here, if Blackwood gained control of the heart of waters and its miraculous properties, the consequences would echo through history for generations to come. Some battles chose the warrior, his grandfather had always said. This was one of those battles, and the fate of the entire American West hung in the balance. The standoff in the sacred amphitheater stretched taut as a bowstring, 4 defenders facing 3 professional killers, while supernatural light danced across ancient stone. Morrison's eyes fixed on the small pouch in Isabella's hands with an intensity that spoke of obsession, while his men shifted nervously, clearly unsettled by the otherworldly atmosphere of the place. "You have no idea what you're holding, do you?" Morrison said, his cultured voice taking on an almost reverent tone. "That little vial contains the secret of immortality itself. Men have searched for such a thing since the dawn of civilization." "Men like Blackwood," Isabella replied, her voice steady despite the weapons pointed at her heart. "Men who believe power belongs to whoever can seize it." "Power belongs to whoever can use it responsibly," Morrison corrected. "Mr. Blackwood has the vision and resources to ensure that the gift of the sacred waters benefits all of humanity, not just a handful of Apache mystics and frontier hermits." White Feather's laugh was harsh as winter wind. "Responsible, your master has murdered dozens of people to claim something that was never his to take. The heart of waters chooses its own guardians, and it has never chosen men whose hearts are poisoned with greed." "Superstitious nonsense," Morrison snapped, though his eyes never left the glowing pool. "Water is water, regardless of where it springs from or what legends surround it. The fact that this particular water has certain beneficial properties simply makes it a valuable natural resource to be properly managed." Cole had been studying the tactical situation while the others talked. 3 gunmen professionally positioned, but clearly uncomfortable with their surroundings. The supernatural light and ancient atmosphere were working on their nerves, creating doubt and hesitation where there should have been cold efficiency. "Joaquin," he said quietly, never taking his eyes off Morrison, "when I give the word, take the one on the left." The federal agent's almost imperceptible nod was the only indication he'd heard. "Mrs. Martinez," Morrison continued, extending his hand with careful courtesy, I'm prepared to offer you safe passage to any destination you choose, along with compensation for your husband's unfortunate death. All I ask in return is that small vial and any documents pertaining to its discovery. And if I refuse, Morrison's smile was cold as a January morning, then I'll take what I came for anyway, and your child will grow up an orphan if it lives long enough to be born. The naked threat shattered the last pretense of civilized negotiation. Cole saw Isabella's face go white, saw her free hand move protectively to her belly, and felt something cold and deadly crystallize in his chest. He'd lost one family to forces beyond his control. He'd be damned if he'd lose another to human greed and cruelty. Now, he said quietly. The sacred amphitheater erupted in violence. Cole's Winchester barked first, the bullet catching Morrison's right-hand man's center mass and dropping him instantly. Joaquin's shot came a split second later, his target spinning away with a cry of pain and rage. White Feather moved with surprising speed for his age, his war club finding the third gunman's wrist with bone-crushing force, sending the man's rifle clattering across the stone floor. Morrison himself proved faster than expected, diving behind a natural stone formation as bullets chipped fragments from the rock where his head had been. He returned fire with a nickel-plated revolver, the shots echoing like thunder in the confined space. "The water!" he shouted to a surviving man. "Get the water!" But the wounded gunman was more concerned with his shattered wrist than following orders. He scrambled toward the tunnel entrance, seeking escape rather than continuing a fight that had turned decisively against them. Morrison found himself alone, outnumbered and outgunned, but far from finished. "You think this ends anything?" he called from behind his rocky shelter. "Blackwood has resources you can't imagine, connections reaching to Washington itself. Kill me, and he'll simply send others." "Then we'll kill them too," Cole replied grimly, working his way around the pool's perimeter to get a clear shot at Morrison's position. And after that, Morrison's voice carried the manic edge of a man who knew he was beaten, but refused to accept defeat. "You can't fight progress forever, Maverick. The age of the frontier is ending. Civilization is coming, whether you want it or not." "Civilization," White Feather said the word heavy with contempt. "You speak of civilization while threatening pregnant women and poisoning sacred waters. Your kind of progress brings only death and suffering. My kind of progress brings order to chaos, prosperity to poverty." Morrison rose from cover, his revolver, seeking targets. This water could cure diseases, extend human life, solve the greatest challenges facing mankind. And you'd keep it hidden in this godforsaken cave wasted on Apache ceremonies and frontier folklore. Isabella had taken shelter behind one of the larger rock formations, but Cole could see her clearly in the phosphorescent light. She was pale but determined, the small vial of sacred water clutched protectively against her chest. "The water chooses its own purpose," she called out, her voice carrying clearly across the amphitheater. "James found that out the hard way. It won't be corrupted or enslaved no matter who tries to claim it." "Nonsense," Morrison snapped, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. The supernatural atmosphere of the place was working on him too, creating doubt where there should have been confidence. White Feather began to chant in his native tongue, the ancient words seeming to resonate with the very stones of the cave. The phosphorescent glow in the pool intensified, and the pictographs on the walls appeared to writhe more actively, as if the spirits themselves were awakening to defend their sacred space. "What's he doing?" Morrison demanded, genuine fear creeping into his voice for the first time. "Asking for help," Cole replied simply, and put 2 quick shots into Morrison's rocky shelter, driving the man deeper into cover. The chanting grew louder, and with it came other sounds, whispers that seemed to emanate from the stone itself, the soft splash of water that moved without wind, the distant thunder of drums that had no visible source. The very air grew thick with power, charged with energies that modern science had no name for. Morrison's nerve finally broke. He burst from cover, running not toward the tunnel entrance, but toward the sacred pool itself, his revolver blazing wildly as he sought to reach the source of the supernatural phenomena. "If I can't have it," he screamed, "then no one can." He raised a bundle of dynamite that had been concealed in his coat, clearly intending to destroy the heart of waters rather than lose control of it. The act was pure spite, the tantrum of a man who'd built his identity around always getting what he wanted. Whitefeather stepped directly into Morrison's path, ancient war club raised high. The two enemies faced each other across centuries of cultural divide, the guardian of sacred waters and the man who would enslave them for a profit. You cannot destroy what is eternal, Whitefeather said calmly and brought his club down on Morrison's dynamite with supernatural precision. The explosion that followed was strangely muffled, contained somehow within a sphere of protective energy that seemed to emanate from the old Apache himself. When the smoke cleared, both men lay motionless beside the sacred pool. Morrison's schemes and ambitions were scattered like ashes on the cave floor, while Whitefeather's breathing grew shallow and labored. Cole and Joaquin reached him simultaneously, finding the old Apache's life ebbing away like water from a broken vessel. The explosion had taken its toll, but there was peace in Whitefeather's ancient eyes, the satisfaction of a duty completed and a sacred trust preserved. The guardianship passes. Whitefeather whispered, his eyes finding Cole's with desperate urgency. The heart of waters needs protectors who understand both worlds, the old ways and the new. You must choose Cole Maverick. Will you take up the sacred trust? Cole looked from the dying medicine man to Isabella, who had approached despite the obvious danger. Her hand rested protectively over her unborn child, and in her eyes he saw the future stretching out before them, a future where ancient wisdom and modern challenges would have to find common ground. I'll protect the water, he promised solemnly. All of it, the sacred and the practical both. Whitefeather smiled, an expression of profound peace crossing his weathered features. Then the spirits are satisfied. The heart of waters will flow free for another 1,000 years. With those words, the last guardian of the Apache waterways closed his eyes for the final time. The supernatural phenomena that had terrorized Morrison's men gradually faded, leaving only natural starlight reflecting off the sacred pool's surface. Joaquin checked Morrison's body, confirming what they all knew. Dead, he reported simply. Looks like the explosion got him when Whitefeather struck the dynamite. Justice, Isabella said quietly, or perhaps something deeper than justice. What happens now? Cole asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Now we rebuild, Joaquin replied, gathering Morrison's scattered papers. The federal case against Blackwood just got a lot stronger with Morrison's death in these documents. Isabella's testimony, combined with the evidence James gathered, should be enough to bring down the entire conspiracy. And the water, Isabella looked up from where she knelt beside Whitefeather's still form. The water stays protected, hidden, sacred. She held up the small vial of glowing liquid. Some gifts are too powerful for any one person to control. As they prepared to leave the amphitheater, Cole found himself thinking about the strange path that had brought them together. Two damaged souls seeking justice for murdered spouses, an old Apache fighting to preserve ancient ways, a federal agent pursuing corruption across territorial lines. All of them united by the need to protect something precious from those who would destroy it for profit. We'll need to decide what to tell people, Joaquin said as they made their way back through the cave system. The official report can't include glowing water and Apache magic. The truth is often stranger than what people are willing to believe, Isabella agreed. Perhaps it's better that way. They emerged into the canyon to find Morrison's surviving men long gone, fled into the night with their wounded and their fear. The sacred valley lay peaceful under starlight, the ancient cottonwoods whispering secrets to the wind. What will you do now? Cole asked Isabella as they walked toward the valley entrance. Stay if you'll have me, she replied, her voice soft but certain. This land needs guardians, and this child needs a home where it can grow up, understanding both worlds, the practical and the mystical. Cole felt something shift in his chest walls, built from grief and isolation, beginning to crumble under the pressure of unexpected hope. The ranch will need rebuilding. Morrison's men burned the house. Then we'll rebuild together, Isabella said, taking his hand in the starlight. All of us, you, me, this child, and whoever else needs sanctuary from a world that's forgotten how to respect sacred things. They walked in comfortable silence toward the canyon mouth, toward a future that would demand courage, wisdom, and the willingness to stand between the sacred and those who would profane it. Behind them, the heart of waters continued its eternal flow, protected by new guardians who understood that some truths were worth dying for, and worth living for too. Epilogue, 1 year later. The new house at Thunder Creek Ranch was larger than the old one, built with rooms enough for the family Cole and Isabella were creating together. The spring that fed the creek ran clear and strong, no longer threatened by drought or the schemes of greedy men. Isabella had given birth to a daughter they named Elena Rose, honoring both the wife Cole had lost and the new life that carried their hopes into the future. The child thrived in the clean air and sacred water of the ranch, growing strong and healthy under the protection of parents who understood the value of what they guarded. Joaquin Ramirez had become a frequent visitor, bringing news of the outside world and updates on the federal prosecution of Blackwood's conspiracy. The railroad magnate had been arrested in Chicago, his empire crumbling under the weight of evidence gathered by dedicated investigators. Justice had been slow, but it had been thorough. On quiet evenings when the baby slept and the cattle grazed contentedly in green pastures, Cole and Isabella would sit beside the sacred pool in White Feathers Valley and listen to the eternal song of flowing water. Sometimes they spoke of the future of the child, who would grow up knowing both worlds, the practical and the mystical, the civilized and the wild. Sometimes they simply held each other and marveled at the strange paths that had brought them together, two broken souls healed by love and purpose, and the ancient wisdom of a land that remembered all its guardians. The water flowed free as it had for 1,000 years, as it would for 1,000 more. And in the sacred trust between humanity and the living earth, new stories were born each day, stories of courage and sacrifice, of love that transcended loss, and of the eternal truth that some things could never be bought or sold, only earned through blood, honor, and the willingness to stand guard over what the world held most precious. The guardianship had passed to worthy hands, and the heart of waters beat strong and free beneath the endless Texas sky.